Good evening. We will call the November 14th Kettleville Hills Board of Commissioners meeting to order. And if everyone would stand, please, for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we head into our moment of silence, just a couple of things I'd like to mention. First, on the heels of Veterans Day, certainly ask that we remember the veterans. We certainly have a lot of veterans in our town, and remember their families, and certainly the current men and women in our military that sacrifice daily and have sacrificed for our freedom and our way of democracy. I'd also like to ask you keep in mind we have a number of people in our community that are mourning recent losses. Bob and Linda Woodard, Linda's mother, passed away week before last. We also, the Ingram family, Ivy and Matt. You may know that Matt Ingram's aunt passed away. Steve and Loretta Michael, Loretta's sister, passed away. And then just as recent as last night, Harriet Banner's mother passed away, and she is with her family now. So I do ask that you please keep all of those families in your thoughts. And certainly Commissioner Hogan, whose daughter is dealing with some medical issues. Certainly when you think about everything that everyone's going through, it also helps you count your blessings. And so as we think about that into our moment of silence, but on a more positive note, because moments of silence don't always have to recognize the mourning or the loss, I think on a positive note entering to it, I want to start the meeting by also congratulating Bob Woodard as a county commissioner-elect for Dare County Commissioners, and wish him well as he represents all of us with his upcoming service.
Thank you, Mayor.
With that, if you'll join me in a moment of silence, please. Thank you. First on the agenda this evening is the approval of the agenda. Is there a motion?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor, please signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. All right, we have two public hearings this evening. We'll take these in order as they're presented on the agenda. There's three public hearings this evening, and again, we'll take them as they present on the agenda. The first is to Chapter 130, General Offenses, Section 130.02, Noise, a complete revision to the existing noise regulations. And the public hearing, during this time that the public hearing is set aside, we will only be fielding comments specific to this topic. There still will be time set aside later for general comments from the public, but each public hearing is only specific to content for that topic. If you're speaking on matters relevant to this issue, as an individual, please limit your time to 3 minutes. If you're speaking on behalf of a group, limit your time to 5 minutes, please. And when you approach the lectern, please identify yourself by name and address. We did have a sign-up sheet for each of the public hearings. This first public hearing on the noise, a complete revision to the existing noise regulations, there were not anyone signed up. No one was signed up, sorry, to speak. But if you would like to speak on that, you still may have the opportunity to do so. If you would just raise your hand and we'll call you up. Is there anyone that would like to speak this evening at the public hearing on the noise ordinance? Okay, then we will close that public hearing and open it up for board discussion. Anyone like to speak about this first?
I will, Mayor. I don't have a problem with it the way it's written right now. I think it's been well written, and I think it's going to benefit everybody in the long run. I think I think we're going to find out once it's implemented that it may have to be looked at again, but that's not a problem because we can always make a revision to it. But and there's a couple of things that I might like different than somebody else might, but I'm satisfied with it the way it is.
Mayor, we've certainly gone over it a number of times, and I too like the way it's written, and I certainly agree with Commissioner Hogan that we got to start somewhere, and let's see how this tweaks out, and hopefully it's a good document, and certainly something that the board can come back and change later if there's any tweaking to be done. So I'm for this.
And I concur with Commissioners Hogan and Woodard, and in light of the fact that nobody spoke and we don't have any great opposition at this point, I think, again, we've got to start somewhere. So I think we need to just go ahead and go forward with what we've got right now, and we can have a starting place and go from there.
Yeah, also before we go on, I'd like to thank our town attorney, Steve Michaels, for all the work that he did on this and
Absolutely.
trying to keep us from, keep us out of jail.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, and for those of you who certainly have been attending meetings or following this on the agenda, this has been on our agenda several times. We had a lengthy discussion at our last meeting and just decided, even though it wasn't a requirement, we decided it would be in the best interest to do this public hearing just to make sure the public had one more opportunity to provide input if they wanted to. I concur with my fellow commissioners that I think this is a sound ordinance as it's written. A lot of time went into it and study into trying to craft it in such a way that it closed the loopholes in the previous ordinance and really makes it quantifiable so the police department, if they are called, has something that's enforceable. That being said, obviously, as you indicated too, if we get down the road and it's not serving the purpose that we intended to serve, we can always revisit this, but I think it's a great working start. So I'm in favor as well. And with that, an order would be, a motion would be in order. Would anyone like to make the motion?
I'll make that motion, Mayor. I'd like to make a motion to approve a complete revision of existing noise regulation, Chapter 130, General Offenses, Section 130.02, noise. And also, if I can find it.
This one doesn't require, this is just,
Oh, there's
Yep,
one. I'm sorry.
this is-
I thought
this
that
one's simple.
I thought that needed a consistency statement, but it doesn't. So I'll just leave it at that.
okay, motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Yes, ma'am, I'll second it.
Any further discussion? All in favor, please signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you.
Well, I think it's consistent anyway.
Hey, Steve, maybe the county will follow your
You can take it. You'd be the perfect person to take it. Okay, well, next on the agenda is our second public hearing of the evening. This is to Section 153.082 exceptions, to add exceptions for walkways located in the front yard setback. This ordinance amendment unifies the current practice of allowing front yard setbacks or walkways constructed at grade with the provisions of the zoning ordinance. And again, this is the time set aside specifically to speak on this issue. Again, I don't believe we did not have anyone sign up to speak at this public hearing, but it's not too late. Is there anyone that would like to speak at this public hearing? Okay, no, then we will close the public hearing and open the floor for board discussion.
Hey, Greg, would you mind giving a little explanation of this, please, in layman's terms?
Sure. Actually, I'll let Meredith do that. She worked on both these ordinance amendments, and she's prepared to speak to those tonight, I'm sure.
She's made a face at you.
This amendment will add to the exceptions for the regulations to allow sidewalks within the front yard setback up to 5 feet in width, and this would be only located within the private property, not within the right-of-way. It's for sidewalks that typically would go from a parking area to a front door, and we've allowed them in the past, and this would put into regulation what our current practice is.
It's my understanding this was, again, one of those where we're tightening the language and making it consistent with practices.
Right now, it's not an exception, but it has been in practice, so we're making it the exception that it should be.
Great.
Thank you. I don't have a problem with it at all.
Yeah, I don't either, Mayor.
Okay.
I'm prepared to make a motion if you,
That would be great.
I'll move that we accept section 153.082 exceptions, excuse me, and add exemptions for walkways located in the front yard setback. And I know we need a statement, so the amendment is consistent with our comprehensive plans and official plans adopted by Kill Devil Hills. And it's reasonable because it allows for means of access to private property and flexibility for the individual property owner.
Great. Thank you. There's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. And the third public hearing this evening is to Chapter 153 zoning. It's on proposed amendment to Chapter 153 zoning to regulate internet and/or electronic gaming operations. We did not have anyone sign up to speak at this public hearing, but is there anyone from the floor that wishes to speak? Okay, being none, we will close the public hearing. And Meredith, would you do an introduction as well, please?
This amendment establishes regulations for internet gaming operations. It includes adding a definition, several definitions to define what an internet gaming operation is. It establishes regulations for internet gaming operations and then allows them in specific zoning districts, including the commercial, light industrial 1 and light industrial 2. Some of the regulations include that the internet gaming operations can only be part of a primary business. They can only have 2 machines per business. Hours are limited to that of the primary business. It will require administrative review. It requires 1 additional parking space per machine at the business site for the internet gaming. 500 feet separation from the property line of an establishment with internet gaming from single-family dwellings, churches, mobile homes, places of worship, other religious buildings, childcare facilities, public and private schools, playgrounds, and other principal businesses that may have internet gaming. They have to be separate from each other. There's no consumption of alcohol within the internet gaming area, and the minimum age would be 18. And this would also, again, be limited to our commercial and light industrial zoning districts.
Thank you. Open the floor for discussion from the board.
I think this was, Meredith, correct me if I'm wrong, we did this because the state had ruled that these things are legal, is that correct? Because we had a moratorium on them at one time.
Correct.
But the state ruled that they are legal, so in order to protect ourselves from having to...
I don't know that they ruled they were legal. They ruled they were not, they did not fall under the internet or the video poker regulations in the general statute. So they could not be banned under that general statute, and therefore, weren't under that, and the municipalities and counties were then, if they wanted to regulate them, had to do it within their own regulations.
And the Supreme Court has not yet ruled. There's a case in the Supreme Court, so we wait to see what they say, but the likelihood is that you're going to have to regulate them through your land use plan.
State Supreme Court?
Yeah.
Oh, state, okay.
Thank you.
That's good, thank you.
Does anyone have any comments?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Would anyone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we, I would pick the hardest one, wouldn't I?
You just
Okay.
approve
All
the,
right, I make a motion that we approve the zoning amendment to Chapter 153 zoning to regulate the internet and/or electronic gaming operations. The amendments include additions to 153.002 definitions, the additions of 153.310 special regulations for internet and/or electronic gaming operations to establish regulations, and to amend 153.176 permitted uses commercial zone 153.206 permitted uses light industrial 2 zone, and 153.226 permitted uses light industrial 1 zone to add this use. And the consistency statement, am I doing this right?
you're doing perfect.
Okay. Is the proposed amendment to establish special regulations for internet and/or electronic gaming operations and to establish appropriate zones for their use is consistent with all comprehensive plans and other official adopted plans of the town of Kill Hills that are applicable. And the amendment is reasonable and in the public interest because it establishes reasonable limits for this type of operation and appropriate locations for their use.
Second it, Mayor.
Great, thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, thank you. Well done. Okay. Next, we'll move straight into the time set aside, the first time set aside this evening for public comment. Now, this is open to anything you would wish to bring forth and address with the board. We do ask if you're going to speak during public comment to please limit your comments to 3 minutes as an individual or 5 minutes if you're speaking on behalf of a group. I do not believe we had anyone sign up this evening, but it's not too late. So if you do wish to speak, just raise your hand and we'll call you up, and please identify yourself by name and address. Is there anyone that wishes to speak at this first public comment session?
Mike. Come on, my last night, man, my last night.
You might be saving it for the end. Go for it.
I'll have something for you in a second.
Okay, yes. Mr. Almany.
James Almany, 113 Porthole Court. I'd just like to ask, one of the new businesses in Kill Devil Hills made a rather shameful display on the front of their business in the matter of a banner. And, I don't know how many people saw it or, the word got around. Myself, I think it's just, it's ridiculous that it would come to something like that. And, I know that the town of Kill Devil Hills takes a beating sometimes in reference to, some of their rules and the way that they're kind of implemented. And I was hoping that maybe you all can straighten out. You don't get much of a chance to really say what was really taking place or what really took place that maybe pushed this gentleman to make this this kind of display on the front of his building. Whether it was something that he's mad at the town for doing, or maybe it was something that that maybe he didn't follow through on, or things that maybe he didn't have put in place already that maybe he just misunderstood. So I'm hoping that maybe that you all can kind of straighten this out, and a chance that maybe the public has an idea of what really transpired. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else this evening that would like to speak at public comment? Okay. Then we will go to response to public comment. Greg or Meredith, can I get you to, okay, Greg, if you'll
I'll do
address
the best I can to
Mr.
answer
Almany's.
Mr. Albany's question. Mr. Albany, I really don't know. There's a business moving into town. They have communicated with us. They've gotten a zoning approval for their business to locate there, and then they were in the process, as I understood, of getting approval through the building inspector, which is the North Carolina Building Code. And there was some access issues, I believe, that were discussed, another door and some interior remodeling. And we were discussing with that with their engineer on the Friday before the sign appeared, and then then the sign appeared. So there really wasn't any exchange directly with the owner so much as the sign came up. So I do think there's better ways to resolve differences if they come about though.
Okay. We don't have any old business this evening, so we'll move straight into new business. And we have a presentation this evening, which is the first item under new business. Ken Willson is here with Coastal Planning and Engineering to give us a project information update on beach nourishment.
Thanks, Mayor.
Welcome.
Thank you.
It'll take it a second, Mr. Wilson.
No problem.
I'm rubbing.
You guys keep the old box down there in the basement. So we'll try to get through this pretty quick. I imagine you all have studied it pretty thoroughly, have a pretty good understanding of what's involved in the document. We had set aside, I think, 2 meetings that CP&E would come up here and have some discussions with you when we set this contract up. And we talked about having one in the beginning, but I think the table was pretty well set to get this thing kicked off. So we decided that once the draft was submitted, we would come up, we would have this discussion with you, and then if you decide to move forward and submit the information that's in there to the Corps of Engineers, which was part of the contract. We're just waiting for your approval to go ahead and do that. Then after we receive comments back from the Corps, we would come up for a second meeting and sort of digest what the feedback was from the Corps of Engineers. All right. Just a little bit of background. I guess last year around this time, there was some discussion about moving forward with the 206 type of approach, which is a reimbursable approach of building a federal project. We had some initial discussions with the Wilmington District and some of the regulatory folks involved, and so we got some comments back from the regulatory folks. And this is just a flow chart that we had shown in previous meetings. It basically, sort of outlines the decisions ahead of the board with regards to shore protection. Come on. So we just set up the question, do we pursue shore protection program, yes or no? And if yes, do we want to go about it with this Section 206 approach, or do we want to pursue a locally funded project similar to what Nags Head did? And so after having those discussions, those meetings last year with the Corps, what we decided was best would be for CP&E to develop this project information document and present this information back to the town, and ultimately present the information in the project information document to the Corps so that they could provide us further guidance as to the applicability of the 206 approach. This is just an outline of what was involved in the project information document. We did do a new survey sometime in the middle of the summer, around July. We did a beach profile survey of the entire beach, and then basically, these are the items that went into that project information document. And I'll touch on each one of them, so I'm not going to go through and read each one. Well, I'm glad I wrote some of this down on a piece of paper, because I'm not going to be able to read that very well. This is really the crux of what we wanted to provide the Corps of Engineers. It's a side-by-side comparison to what we're proposing for what we call the proposed 206 project, and what the Corps has already authorized as the North Dare County project. So, we have a number of different parameters in there, and I'll go through each one of them and try to provide a little bit more background. So the first thing we've got there is the project length. You'll see that the authorized project is longer than what we're proposing for the 206 project, and that's because the authorized project includes portions of both Kill Devil Hills and Kitty Hawk. And so we're breaking out the 206 to say we're only looking at constructing the Kill Devil Hills section of the North Dare County project. So that's what the difference in those lengths are up there. And a couple of figures that we had in the report. I believe this is on page 2 of the report. But basically, if we're looking up at the top, up in the area of Kill Devil Hills, you see sort of a yellow highlighted line along the shore. That yellow line represents the entire length of the North Dare County project. And then the red line that's superimposed on top of the yellow line, that's the portion we're talking about building as the 206 project. So that's the discrepancy of distances that were outlined in that first slide that I just showed. This is a zoomed in image of the proposed 206 portion of the project. So what we have here is called the main fill. That main fill basically goes from the boundary of Kill Devil Hills and Kitty Hawk down to right around East 1st Street. And then from East 1st Street, there's a 3,000 foot segment that basically goes down to the Glenmere Avenue beach access, and that's what we call a taper. Basically, when you put a volume of sand out on the beach, you're naturally going to get spreading in either direction. And so to kind of limit the amount of spreading that you get, limit that spreading effect, what the engineers do is they build a taper on either side. And that sort of mitigates against losing a lot of this material right off the bat. But as you'll see on the north side, we also, right now we're following along with basically the Corps of Engineers design. They had stipulated a 3,000 foot taper. Internally, we talked about if we did a local project, we may decrease the length of those tapers depending on what the fill ends up looking like. But right now, as the 206 project is planned, we would have a north taper that would go 3,000 feet into Kitty Hawk. So that's what that line is up on the top. If you need a reference of street, that would go up to North White Avenue in Kitty Hawk. So the next two parameters, I'm going to come back to this chart a lot. Like I said, this is really the crux of what we want to give to the Corps of Engineers, help them move forward in their decision-making process. The next two items is the dune dimensions and the berm dimensions. And what you'll see is those two numbers are exactly identical. We're proposing the exact same dimensions for the dune and for the berm as what were proposed in the Corps authorized project. This is a sketch, a schematic out of the Corps' authorizing document. It shows just a typical profile. You see the dune portion over there to the left. The top of that dune is built to 12 feet, reference to North American vertical datum, so basically 12 feet above sea level, if you will. And the top of that berm is 25 feet wide, and then it slopes down to where it would toe into the +6 contour, and that +6 contour would be extended out 50 feet. And that would be your storm protection. The combination of that berm and the 50-foot berm and the 25-foot wide crest of the dune is what provides you the storm damage reduction. And then all the rest of the sand is basically advanced fill, and it's also sand that's placed there that's understood that it's going to migrate offshore. And if I can get through, I think I've probably shown this before, but it's a neat little schematic that sort of dissects the different parts of the beach fill. So when it's first placed, this is what it looks like, but there's really, within that orange section, there's really 3 different segments. So as the dredge goes away, that top segment basically migrates offshore and nourishes the offshore portion of the profile. So you haven't lost that sand. The beach, the dry beach, certainly looks thinner or narrower, but you haven't lost that sand. It's protecting the offshore portion of the profile. And then over a course of say 3 to 5 years, you've got this other sand wedge out here that we know will erode with normal conditions over the course of 3 to 5 years. And so when that fill is gone, then it's time to renourish this design so that you're never really losing the design. And so when I talk about the design in that previous slide where I talked about the dune and the 50-foot wide berm, that's your design. That should stay there forever. That's what's providing you your storm damage protection, and then you're basically just feeding on top of that every several years as needed. This is just to get through that quick. All right, so construction volumes. Of course, volumes play in very heavily to the actual cost of the project. The authorized project, which again was both Kill Devil Hills and Kitty Hawk, the estimated volume was 4.3 million cubic yards. we're estimating right here for the proposed 206 project somewhere between 1.16 million and 1.9 million cubic yards. And I've got a slide here that talks a little bit about how we got there. So the Corps' analysis showed that they would need to dredge basically 4.3 million cubic yards out of the ocean to get to build the project. But they're assuming that for every 1.5 cubic yards they're dredging, they basically get 1 effective cubic yard of sand on the beach, and that's because the material in the borrow site that was chosen was finer than the native beach. There were also some higher levels of silt in that material, and so that overfill number of 1.5 basically means they have to pump a lot more. They have to pump 50% more material to get to build the beach that they want to build. You can see that effectively what they want on the beach is 2.9 million cubic yards. But again, that includes both Kill Devil Hills and Kitty Hawk. From that data, we looked over that, and basically we were able to peel out of that when we talked about that advanced fill that they put on top of the design that would last, what the Corps originally designed that would last 3 years. That's basically equal to 43.8 cubic yards per linear foot of beach. So we pulled that out of their data. It wasn't specifically stated, but we were able to deduce that from some of the data that's in the authorizing document. And we moved forward with the 206 plan, assuming that, just as the Corps stated, that we would need to place advanced fill on top of the design at 43.8 cubic yards per linear foot. So we went through and we calculated the volumes that were needed to build the Corps design based on a survey that the Corps did back in 2006 and the survey that we just did in 2012. And basically what we found is that you basically need 1.9 million cubic yards to construct the proposed Section 206 project based on the 2012 survey that we just did in July. That last bullet point, it says grain size reduction potential could reduce that volume of 1.9 million cubic yards by 40%, which would take it down to 1.16. Basically, the coarser the material, the more steep it will actually stack up, and to achieve the same amount of protection, you have to put, or you can put less fill out there if you're using a coarser material. When we say coarse, people are worried, is it going to be very shelly? What are we talking about, rocks or shells? We're really talking about the type of material that was put on Nags Head Beach. That sand is coarser than the native sand that's on this beach right now. And the borrow site, which I'll get into a little bit later, we believe we've found some material that's even a little bit coarser than that, which is good. But one of the interesting facts when we compared those surveys, the 2005 and the 2012, was that we found that basically we need 300,000 cubic yards less to build the beach project today than we would have calculated if we used the 2005 survey. So in essence, you could say, well, have you gained 300,000 cubic yards of material in the last 7 years? Now, those of you that walk the beach and you're paying attention to the width of the beach. I know that after the storm, I was up here last week, and the beach looks very thin. But after a storm, you would suspect that you would get some rebound to that. So, those are interesting numbers. There are also some offshore features that are migrating back and forth in deeper water, out in 20 to 25 feet of water. So that may be playing into some of that 300,000 cubic yards as well. So again, just touching on that volume number, that's why we have a range of 1.166 to 1.943. The 1.943 is just straight calculated. The 1.166 takes into consideration if you were to use a coarser material, you could realize a 40% reduction in that total volume. The construction time, again, this has a lot to do with the amount of volume we're talking about pumping. In the Corps' design, they actually looked at pumping for 12 consecutive months to build the North Dare project. This project, based on the volumes and the type of equipment that we're looking at using, we're estimating maybe about 5 months to complete. The construction equipment is actually different. The Corps had initially proposed to use borrow area N1, which is right off of Kill Double Hills. We're proposing to use a borrow site that's further off or further down the coast off of Nag's Head. Because of the quality of the material, you actually see cost savings by using the material from further away, because you're using less material. So we would be looking at using a hopper dredge, which basically you're sucking the material up into the hopper, and the hopper is steaming a distance for this project to be something around 8 to 10 miles, coming back up here, marrying into an offshore disposal pipe and pumping that material out on the beach. You probably saw some of that down in Nag's Head. They actually use both of these pieces of equipment, a cutter head dredge and a hopper dredge for that project. The borrow areas I mentioned, they are different. The Corps' authorized project proposed to use N1, which is just offshore, and we're talking about S1. And then finally, that last number, the mean grain size of the borrow area. This is where we get our reduction in volumes based on some of the preliminary numbers that we've looked at with the data that's available offshore in these offshore borrow sites. The Corps stated that the N1 borrow area had a mean grain size of 0.22. We're looking somewhere between 0.4 and 0.5 millimeters.
Hey, Ken?
Yes, sir.
Can we go back to that? Do you mind if I ask a couple of questions?
Nope.
Does the cutter head can't pipe a larger grain, and that's why you would use a hopper? If you're suggesting S1 because it's a higher grain?
It's because of the distance the borrow area is away from the site.
Okay.
So you could pipe. Theoretically, you could pipe that distance, but it would be more efficient to use a hopper dredge to suck it up, steam over to where you need to pump it out, and pump it out. You'd need a lot of booster pumps, basically. They'd probably take it right into the beach at Nag's Head and try to pump it all the way up the beach from Nag's Head, which is very inefficient.
Yeah. Thank you.
No problem. This is just some of the borrow area work that we did. I think, again, I had some page numbers here. I think this is page 5 and page 6 maybe of the study. This figure shows the S1 borrow area, which is the larger shape that those 3 blue boxes are inside of. That's the borrow area that the Corps originally designed for the Dare County projects. Those 3 blue areas are actually borrow areas that the town of Nag's Head permitted for their projects. They only used the southern of those 2 borrow areas. They did not use any of the material in the northern borrow area. And so what we did was we looked at some of that material in the northern borrow area. We also looked at some vibrocores that the Corps of Engineers had taken in their investigations. And we looked at the bathymetry. And basically, from that core data and from the bathymetry, we've drawn this green outline, which parts of it are inside of that blue box, parts of it are not. We're avoiding those pink circles there, or some magnetic or sonar anomalies that were discovered during the course of that study that could be cultural resources, so they've already been buffered out. But basically what we found is within that green area, which if we were to move forward, that would be basically our targeted area to permit a borrow site, is about 3.5 million cubic yards of sand in that area with a mean grain size of 0.4 to 0.5 millimeters. So getting into the Section 206 details a little bit, in the project information document we provided a write-up on what's involved with this limited reevaluation report. This is an additional task that would be required if we were to go the 206 route. I think somewhere around page 36 there's a table that basically has each step in that process to get through the LOR. It's color-coded, talks about the role that the contractor would play, or the consultant, which could be CP&E, the role the town would play, and the role that the Corps would play. The Corps has a lot of oversight and review in this LOR process, which adds to some of the time and to some of the costs of going this route. There's also something called the Project Partnership Agreement that's basically negotiations between the Town Council and the Corps of Engineers Council to come up with this agreement to establish this Project Partnership Agreement on the cost sharing of the project. And then there's also the Corps of Engineers review of the plans and specifications and the bid package when we were to get to that point. Okay, so this is a schedule. I think this is on page 39, but it basically lays out the entire schedule. We put a start date in there somewhere around May of 2013. We just wanted to give a little bit of buffer, knowing the holidays are coming up. We plan on submitting this information to the Corps. We need to get some feedback from them, and then just with selecting a contractor and getting contracts in place, we thought May of 2013 was a comfortable starting point for this. So if we were to start, you'll see you would start the LOR, the permitting, the sand search, and with those three items, you would start those immediately. We've got a little bit of lag to start negotiating that project partnership agreement. The interesting thing about that is once it's actually processed and signed, any of the engineering work that you might do towards the completion of this study could actually also be cost shared. Now I say that with a grain of salt, that in the past the Corps found a way to sort of make sure that doesn't happen until the last minute, and they're really only cost sharing. The precedent is that they're really only cost sharing the construction portion of the project, but that's a possibility. We also talk a little bit in the report about easements. I know Greg has had some conversations with Lee Wren. I've had some conversations with Lee Wren. We talked a little bit about whether the easements that were obtained for the federal project would be transferable for this. He had mentioned that's exactly what they did for the Nags Head project. They did use the federal easements. They were transferred to the town. I think they went from a perpetual easement to a 10-year easement, and there was probably some legwork there, but Lee didn't seem to think that we'd be starting from scratch on that. The plans and specs and the bidding, contract award, that's fairly straightforward, and then basically we get to that construction period, which is 5 months. And the construction on that, we're talking about fall of 2017 to go to construction for that. You can see the big ticket item there is that LRR. It's the process as we laid it out in the report is almost 3 years long. The permitting should be done, much sooner than that. We have two lines there for permitting. The red line assumes that we would be able to get by with an environmental assessment. The blue line assumes that we may have to go the route of an EIS. I've got a few slides to talk about the environmental data, but we feel pretty comfortable that we're going to be able to do this with the EA, so we'll be on that red schedule. Alright, so basically all that information I just presented to you, if you all want to move forward with providing this information to the Corps and receiving this feedback from the Corps, that's basically the information that we're going to provide to the Corps to make those decisions. It's the design specifics and then our understanding of how the 206 project process should work. Now those meetings that we had last year with the Corps, the regulatory folks, both with the Corps and the state, also requested that we provide them an environmental inventory of the data that we would use to support whether or not we could go about this with an environmental assessment or an environmental impact statement with regards to permitting. And so basically, we've gone through, and there's basically two primary sources of data. It's the EIS that was done for the federal storm damage reduction project by the Corps, and then the EIS that was done by Nags Head for their beach nourishment project. And so underneath of there are all the bullets of the supporting documents that go with that. So in combination, all those documents provide quite a bit of information that's very relative to the Kill Devil Hills proposed project. And so basically we went through and those two sources and we pulled out information on sea turtles, on piping plovers, other shorebirds, sea beach amaranth, benthic fauna, And we basically wrote up in the report, what information was available, and then we also consulted other agencies to see if we could find even more relevant data actually within Kill Devil Hills. So we were able to obtain some sea turtle nesting data, shorebird and waterbird data on Atlantic sturgeons, and that's also been documented in that report. Now, the last time I was here, I talked about if you're to move forward with this, it's not, this project information document contract, it's not that, this is just one extra step in the process. All of this information that we've, now inventoried and now we have in-house, that was all stuff that would have had to been done if you were to move forward with the 206 or the local. Any project that you're going to move forward with, this is work that's already been done. The same with some of the preliminary work we've done with the borrow area to find a targeted area. That's also stuff that would have needed to be done anyway. So we're somewhat ahead of the game here. So the discussion on the environmental documents, basically we would submit a second letter to the Corps Regulatory Division with that environmental inventory and say this is the information we have, this is why we believe we should be able to go through the permitting with using an environmental assessment. And then we expect they would make that decision and the road ahead would be much more clear. So with all that, once that's submitted to the Corps, basically we're back to this position in the flow chart. So we develop that information document, we solicit comments from the Corps of Engineers, and basically that puts us all the way back to with this information, do we pursue a shore protection program or not? So we need to make the decision yes or no. If yes, based on this information, does it look like we move in the direction of Section 206, or do we go with the locally funded project? And so I brought those two, if you decide to pursue shore protection, I brought those two options to the top and played this out a little bit further. So if you go the route of the 206, what you have in store is you initiate the 206 project, which is basically sending a letter to the Corps saying this is what we're going to do. And then basically you got two lists of things that need to be done. The list on the right are items that would need to be done whether you do a locally funded project or a Section 206 project. The items on the left are the extra tasks that are required if you go the route of the 206. And ultimately you'd get down to construction. So how much does it cost? Well, these numbers are also in the report. This is sort of some of the last stuff that's in the report. But for the proposed 206 project, the cost estimates, we used a Corps estimating cost estimating program and came up with basically the mobilization we could expect to see somewhere in the range of $2.7 million to mobilize the dredging equipment to the site. After that, we'd be paying somewhere around $9 a cubic yard for the sand. So using those volumes that I talked about before, remember there was a range between 1.16 and 1.9 something. So basically if you take that out, you're looking at somewhere between 15.2 million and 23.2 million. Now this also includes a 15% contingency. So take that mobilization and that unit cost and add a 15% contingency factor to that. That's how we got those numbers. So there's some safety factor built into that. We add on top of that the soft costs. This is basically the permitting and the 206 type of work associated with it. This is not construction costs. We're looking at somewhere around another 1.9 million. And so at the end of the day, if we were to get full reimbursement from the federal government on the 206 project, the non-federal portion of the project is $7.2 to $10 million. That assumes a 65% cost share with the federal government. And again, there's that note down the bottom that those numbers could further be cost shared with the state and also the county. Almost there. All right, so the other option would be to pursue the locally funded project. And so since the project information document was really concentrated on this 206 approach, we haven't spent a whole lot of time looking at what the design might actually look like for this locally funded project. But in order to give you all some information to make some informed decisions, we basically used some assumptions from the town of Nags Head. project and said, well, what would it take to build a comparable project to what Nags Head did in Kill Devil Hills? This is basically the same timeline with the local project. You're looking at those permitting numbers. We're still talking about a sand search. You would still need to do some legwork with the easements. We kind of have both a red scale and a blue scale here, just in case you had to go the EIS route. Again, we feel pretty comfortable that we'll be working on the EA, the red schedule there. But basically, when you get out to construction, you're talking about the project being constructed by December 2015 as opposed to December 2017, sometime in fall of 2017 with the 206 project. So getting back to cost, if you were to make some general assumptions, you would certainly use the same mobilization and unit costs for the local project. The soft costs go from 1.9 million down to about 1.28 million. You would be eligible for cost sharing from the state and from the county. Obviously, you would not be eligible for cost sharing from the federal government. And I think we did some back of the envelope calculations. Basically, if you put the same amount of fill out there that Nags Head put out there, and you decrease the size of those tapers, an off-the-cuff estimate would be somewhere in the range of between 15 and 20 million. I think we came up with somewhere around 18 million. But again, those are rough numbers at this point in time. So pros and cons of the Section 206. Obviously we're hoping to learn a lot more once we submit these letters to the Corps and we get back some feedback. But the pros really, the biggest pro is that you give yourself a chance at these federal funds, the 65% of the cost sharing. This slide's a little bit older. I'm not sure how strongly I feel about this second bullet point. This earmarks may be coming back. We've heard a lot out of Washington that in some way, shape, or form, earmarks will come back. But will that be for Corps of Engineers projects? I think the jury's still out on that. One thing that we got a lot of pushback when we were discussing things with the Corps of Engineers last year is that they said, well, unless you all get us money appropriated, we can't review this document because we have no funding for this project. If you guys don't get funding appropriated for the project, we can't do it. Well, since then, there's been legislation passed that would allow a local government to actually contribute funds to the Corps of Engineers directly to do a task that the Corps of Engineers should do. There's some communities now that are actually building beach projects because they wouldn't have to go through with the federal permitting. They're just paying the Corps of Engineers to build their project and using this contributing authority. I know New Hanover County right now is using this and Virginia Beach is using this, but on a much smaller scale, if we wanted to bring them to the table and say, okay, we need you to engage us, at this level, we could set up a memorandum of agreement with the Corps and basically fund their review operations of the document. So that sort of takes care of one of the hurdles that we've seen put up so far. The cons are pretty clear. You've got a lot of added time there, you've got added money, you've got risk that you'll not be reimbursed. The Corps will likely not prioritize this project. When I talk about them doing reviews and things like that, they're going to want to do the projects that they're building. This will be the first time that the Wilmington District has gone through a 206. So you've got that learning curve there, and then there's a strong need for continuous advocacy. So the town is going to have to be its own advocate. It's going to have to be very involved, politically involved, to try to keep this thing moving forward. So some closing thoughts. In general, beach nourishment has been proven to be a viable and economic method to mitigate long-term shoreline erosion and provide storm damage reduction. The Corps will not construct this project on their own. I mean, given all the things that are going on with the Corps budget right now and the past history of this project not seeing funds, I don't think, I couldn't find anyone that would disagree with this statement. Section 206 or some federal credit is still viable, but you must be your own advocate again. And then active public affairs campaign in DC and in Raleigh will be very important if you want to move forward along this 206 line. If you do pursue the 206, I would say seek the county as well as your neighbor's blessing on this. That's one thing the Corps has brought up. Well, what happens to the federal project if Kill Devil Hills breaks out and does their own portion? If you all could get some support from the county and from Kitty Hawk, from Nags Head, that they're on board with you all doing this type of an effort, I think that would go a long way with the Corps. Again, one of those hurdles that's in the way, sort of pulling that out of the way. And then finally, there are advocates out there that are in the same position as you. We could certainly put you in touch with those folks and share some of the stories, some of the lessons learned there. And with that, I think we're done.
Great, thank you, Ken.
Sure.
If you don't mind staying up there
Nope.
for questions. Anyone like to start with questions? Well, I have one, just based on the language that we received from you, or from CPE, as far as your recommendations moving forward at this time. You identified 2 recommendations, which stated that there were no additional appropriations, and that's basically these letters to the Corps. What type of commitment are you making, though, with those letters? Or is it truly just trying to feel out what's going to be their position, and what do we expect could be either way the result of those letters? Meaning, could we find out that's a way to explore that going the 206 route is a dead deal and why waste our time? I mean, is that maybe some of what we could hope to learn, or there is still hope with the 206?
I think the 206 is quite an uphill battle at this point in time. I'd like to see if there's something new. We've actually addressed a lot of the concerns that they had originally. There was a lot of mystery behind it. How does it work? The whole idea about not having any funding, and if we were to put contributing funds on the table as a way that we could bring them to the table now to see how they might react to that. We've definitely given them the side-by-side. There's no mystery to what the Section 206, the proposed 206 project would be. They can clearly understand, how that relates to what was authorized. So we're hoping that we are going to get some real feedback, and that's going to clear the path ahead as far as, do we really take this 206 any further, or do we realize that you have to do the locally funded project? I mean, I've talked to a lot of people about this recently, and everybody says if you think you can afford the locally funded project, it probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense to move forward with the 206. I mean, basically what you're putting on the line is about $500,000 worth of soft costs to see if you can get that, the project partnership agreement in place, and even after that's in place, you basically have to get appropriated funds back. And we've seen some communities down in Florida where over the course of maybe 6 or 7 years, they've still only received back 60 or 70% of the reimbursement that they thought they were going to get. So it's still a constant battle. It's coming back in pieces. It's not one big check. Here's your $12 million back. So there could be some financing charges there that would need to be considered. So it's really we could look at that schedule a little bit more. I mean, the LRR is something that you'd have to move forward with to see what potential this has, and that's, right now we're putting a round number of something around 400,000 on that line item. So, that's the big ticket item that goes along with the 206 that you would be putting out there, and if it didn't work out, there was really no reason to do that to write that document. As far as you did ask a couple other questions about the commitments with those letters. I mean, those first two letters that we would send, basically we're going to send you all a draft of what we would think you would want to send. You go ahead and put it on your letterhead and send it in. We provide the addresses, but those are purely informational. They don't commit you to anything. Even the third letter that was discussed in the project information document, where you were to sort of state that you were pursuing this 206, even that doesn't commit you to anything. I mean, if you all never turn in the LRR or if you, cancel the meeting, it's, we're not committing ourselves to, you're not committing yourselves to anything with those letters.
You guys have any questions?
I think I do, but I'm not sure what it is. Bottom line, it would seem to me, tell me if this is correct, my impression is that there's a lot of pitfalls with the 206, and that it could get strung out pretty long, and a lot of doubt or uncertainty along the way as to whether, when it's going to get done and whether we'll even get the money. So on the surface, that seems like maybe it's not a wise thing to do in some regards, but locally funded project, that is something that basically, if we decide to do that, it's pretty much, barring any unforeseen, difficulties with, but normally a locally funded project, you go and you do it, and then you go through the various steps, and there's a lot less chance for the, these pitfalls that you might run into with 206.
Right, and building off of what Nags Head just did, I mean, it took them 5 or 6 years to get their permits in place. I mean, I think there's a lot of lessons learned from that. There have been more beach projects built in the last 5 or 6 years. I think the agency sort of understand the technology a little bit better. I think the path that we mapped out is realistic with regards to the schedule on the locally funded project.
So if we were to say you had a start May of next year or something, if we were to say locally funded, start in May, what's the most reasonable date that it will be done, and what's I know it's all in the book and all the charts and everything,
2015.
but what's the cost?
Yeah, the date we had was construction being completed by December 2015, and the costs, those costs, that's something we haven't gotten into very in very much detail. We're concentrating on the 206, but we think it's in the neighborhood of 15 to 20 million.
Okay. And that would be money that came from?
It would. I mean, if we were to use the Nags Head model, it would be money that basically comes half from the county and half from the locals.
So, I mean, theoretically, it would cost us, or hypothetically, it would cost us $7.5 million.
Right.
On the low end.
Right. Well, yeah. You said 15, right?
15 to 20.
15 to 20, okay.
15 to 20 was the fill though, but I think we had some 1.2 and some soft cost, Mike.
Yeah, I think,
And some,
I think the number we kind of settled in on was somewhere around 18 and a half.
okay, yeah,
I think. But you're right, the soft cost was about 1.2.
yeah.
So ours would be half of the 18 and a half. Huh?
Right.
Right, okay.
If the county's as generous as they
Right, I was gonna say, oh, that's.
have been.
And there's the financing model that Nags had used. Are you very familiar with that at all?
I'm a little bit. I've been more familiar with it at times. It seems to drift away from me at times. But let's see how.
Was there generally speaking, there was some taxes that were assessed in various levels at the beach compared to the rest of the town, and so I know a lot of it came from that. And,
right.
And the county.
The oceanfront, I believe they increased it at something like 16.
16.
Yeah.
And then the non-ocean front was around 2.
But that 16 is not going to stay there forever. I forget what the date is, but it's supposed to.
I'm not sure if there's an automatic trigger where it falls off, or I mean, it's clearly a municipal services district, so they can pull that out. But I'm not sure what their intent is. I know right now that the fact that they because of the redistribution of sales tax back to the local governments is based on the levy that's in place. I know because they raised their taxes on those oceanfront, they're getting a lot more money back from those county sales tax, and they're paying off the debt on what they borrowed a lot faster than they had anticipated.
It's good old revenue sharing.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Can't fix that one.
So just maybe, I don't know, based on what you've seen since they finished their project and the way, and what has happened since then regarding a couple of storms and the weather conditions and everything else, I kind of think it was a really good thing. And I know some people that are down that way that have homes and businesses, and they can't say enough about it. Even some of them were against it in the beginning, and now they're saying they're really glad they did it.
Right.
And I think a couple of the storms we had, even this year, I think might have done a lot more. So they've actually protected a whole bunch of assets by doing that. Probably well in excess of what they paid for it, I'm sure, with oceanfront structures.
Yep. I mean, Tom Jarrett's along with me, and I know most of you know Tom. He's got a larger breadth of understanding of projects, but I mean, I don't know any projects to where, the local governments moved forward with it and then, they decided that it wasn't worth it. I mean, there are always naysayers within the crowd, but I don't know of any community that's done it and then turned their back on it and said, it wasn't worth it, we don't want to do it. I just don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that's enough. I mean, I think I know enough about, yeah, because I know there's some projects that have been going on for many years, and they keep doing it whenever it's necessary because they know the value of it.
One of the things with the 206 that we've tried to explore a little bit more internally, and maybe some of the feedback that we'll get back from the Corps might answer this, is there, if we know that the possibility is slim, can we go on some sort of an abridged version of the 206 and submit the documents and sort of try to use political pressure to try to move something a little bit more streamlined forward, and see how long we can stay on the path of a locally funded project where at the same time we're moving in parallel with this 206, but not spending $400,000 extra. It's something that's really only been theorized. I mean, we've got ideas and things like that. We probably need to talk to some folks in Washington about how that might actually occur.
It'd be like a hybrid sort of. Yeah. I think that's all I have. Thank you.
You asked most of the questions I was thinking about. I just wanted to make sure we had an all-encompassing hypothetical number, if that's possible, as far as making sure that we had incorporated the soft numbers and per se. I will tell you that I'm on the Shoreline Commission, and we have not had a meeting recently, and depending on what we talk about tonight, we can call a meeting. So that's something that we talked about. If we get on the fast track with this and decide something's going to go forward with either us or Duck, everything was kind of on the standstill for the most part. We were waiting to hear back from y'all, et cetera, et cetera. So I could definitely get in touch with Warren, and we can find out what's going on with the county and how things are going with that. So there really hasn't been any change with what's been going on with the county. So we can call a meeting for that. But I don't really have any other questions other than that. I don't know how there's if there is a way to do what you were talking about with the combination of the two to stay on that track for as long as possible, without there being any harm or any other spending of the money. That would be a preferable choice, as we've gone this far and already are on that track. That would be nice, even though it's still wishful thinking. It would be nice to be able to stay there as long as we can, because
Right.
there's, if there is a possibility, and even if there is a way that we could put our money there and use it and flip it, however that might be.
My turn?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you, Brandon.
Yeah, I don't have any other questions. Again, and I'm not opposed to agreeing to these two recommendations. I think it would certainly help the board in their decision down the road to see what the Corps has to say as far as the environmental requirements go, and then the board can make some decisions then, which route they want to go. So I don't see the harm in supporting these two letters that need to be sent so that we can get some feedback. So I would support that, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. And that's really what, of immediate action for this board to take is the only thing being considered tonight is whether or not to give authorization to submit these letters. And these letters, as I understand clearly and will reiterate, are truly just to basically gather more information to then add to this to be able to make decisions.
Correct. We sat around the table with the Corps and they're like, well, submit it in writing. Give us
Right.
as much detail as you possibly can.
Okay. And that doesn't, so for everyone out there, it doesn't require any additional appropriations. This is part of what we've already appropriated. That being said, I will put out there just for the board, fellow board members, I know this has been talked about in bits and pieces here and there. I think the time will be before us before too long where we will need to be very strategic in engaging the public. And at, one of our future meetings, I think we will need to set a specific type forum to do that.
Absolutely.
To really have some face-to-face public type forum discussions on specifically this topic. So just put that out there for now. I don't want anyone to be concerned that the actions the board's taking tonight, if it seems we're moving favorably and recommending these letters, is committing tax dollars to anything. I mean, those are conversations we need to have with our citizenry, and that will be forthcoming.
No, because I'll state right now, my big concern with this is still how we're going to pay for this. Honestly, I mean, I know I speak like, okay, we're going to do this, but again, that is with the knowledge that what we're doing right this moment, we've already paid for.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, part of that discussion is weighing the pros and the cons. The mayors met, I guess it was just yesterday. It seems like it's been a longer week. Anyway, just yesterday with Chairman Judge, and we were talking about just this recent storm with Sandy. And he was explaining that unless the state has $100 million in public reimbursement request, then you don't get the FEMA stepping in. And without that, you may not even get the state stepping in. So, at my right at the table was the mayor of Kitty Hawk, and they're looking at having to do all of that work coming out of their own town budget, all of the loss and all the cleanup that they've experienced in that town, because we may not reach. Dare County is really the main county that was affected in this storm. We very likely will not reach that $100 million threshold for the state, unlike with Isabel when we did. And so because of that, that's a huge hit to those budgets. And that will be part of the discussion with our citizenry, because, we're fortunate right now, but we could be in a predicament within a matter of years, very similar. So without further ado, because that will be a discussion for another date and time, but I certainly wanted to go on record saying we will have those discussions. Is there a motion to proceed with these two recommendations to propose the letters?
I'll move to do so, Mayor.
I'll second it.
And is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Ken.
Thanks, Ken.
And thanks, Tom.
No problem.
Just send Ken up there. Okay. Next item under new business is proposed amendment to Chapter 110 Business Licensing, Section 110.75, Privilege License Tax Schedule, and that's to add annual privilege license tax for internet and/or electronic gaming operations, and proposed amendment to official fee schedule to include an administrative fee for review of such applications. And Greg or Meredith, who would like to introduce that for us, or
Actually,
or Debbie? Great. Okay, thanks, Debbie.
These are numbers that in Meredith's research throughout the state were very similar to the other towns and counties that do regulate the gaming tables and internet machines. What this simply does, as you stated, Mayor, is it adds an annual privilege license for the business location, and then the $2,000 per gaming machine. As you just approved, each business would only be allowed 2 machines, so that would be a total of $4,000. And then the administrative fee, because also in the ordinance that you approved does require an administrative review by the planning department. So these fees would be added both to the official fee schedule, which is in the budget, and then the Chapter 110 for the business licenses, and staff would recommend the board's approval.
Is the $2,000, is that an annual fee as well, or is just the privilege license?
No, they're both annual.
Both of those are annual, okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Any questions or discussion?
I'm satisfied with it.
I am too.
Okay. Would someone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion. It will be, approve the attached amendment for Chapter 110, Business Licensing, Section 110.75.
I'll second the motion, Mayor.
Great, thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Next, item number 3 under new business is the resolution of intent to permanently abandon a portion of Atlantic Street and notice a public hearing. And, Debbie?
Yes, ma'am. A number of years ago, I'm sure many of you remember, it's a portion of Atlantic Street that was improved, and then it became not improved. It was determined that perhaps the town was not in a position to prove that they owned that right-of-way, and it was recommended by the attorney at the time that the town not continue to improve it. It was scheduled for resurfacing and some drainage, and then that perhaps we should go the extra distance and actually remove the pavement that was there and the water lines, which was done. Everything was done with the exception of this formal process, which does permanently abandon it and allows for the adjacent property owners to split what we had assumed a number of years ago was the town's rights of ways, and also puts it back on the tax record so that ad valorem taxes can be held. There is a process that we go through, or we're required to go through, which includes a public hearing, advertisement of this proposed abandonment for 4 weeks before the public hearing, and then as I stated earlier, if it's approved by the board, the property that we're talking would be divided between the adjoining property owners.
And who does that division? I mean, is that you?
No, by law, what happens is the adjoining property owners each will acquire to the middle of what would be this right-of-way.
Okay.
So all of these lots would then own
Grow.
the property that's within there.
And what if for some reason there was a homeowner that's like, I don't want that? I mean, that would be the time they would come speak at a public hearing. I mean, because if it's done, that is what happens. Am I following this correctly?
Yes, yes, ma'am.
Okay.
They will have the opportunity to come and speak if they're opposed to this for whatever reason.
Okay. But once it's done, they do get,
They get it.
they get
Yeah.
50% or,
Yes,
okay,
ma'am.
okay.
So what you would be doing this evening is setting the public hearing.
They're adopting the resolution and so.
Yes, yes, sir.
Any questions or comments?
Now, you did say, I'm sorry, you did say that that it would be added to their property so that the taxes would reflect that. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So, okay.
We're not talking a huge amount.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, I understand.
Okay.
Mayor, I'm proposed to schedule a public hearing on January the 14th to consider permanently closing and abandoning portions of Atlantic Street and schedule that public hearing.
Okay. Would you also mind adding that we adopt the resolution?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second that.
Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Next is item number 4 under new business, and that is to schedule a public hearing for proposed amendment to Chapter 153 zoning, Section 153.176N, commercial zone permitted uses, to add pool and hot tub sales to list of permitted retail businesses. Greg, do you mind introducing this, please?
I would love to, Mayor. This was a staff-generated amendment to include pool and hot tub sales in the commercial district. And what had happened years before, our zoning ordinance was fashioned a little bit different way, and used to say such uses as, and it had a big list. And today it says these uses and none other. And in the past, we've had pool and hot tub sales in our commercial district, and we felt it was reasonable to include that in with the condition that it was that there would be no outdoor storage of pools or hot tubs, because this has been the only real problem we've had with them in the past. So with that, the planning board recommended on October 16th to forward it to the Board of Commissioners with approval.
Great. Thank you. Questions or discussion?
Would it be more appropriate to talk about it at the public hearing if I have some concerns, or do it at the hearing, right?
Either or. It
Either
may
or.
give
Either
staff
or.
time to, if they need to look into something.
Yeah,
be
well,
appropriate
I've
to bring
spoken to them
up.
also. And I also spoke at the planning board meeting, try to be brief. We've put together a community appearance commission. They'll be having their first meeting in January. And also, we've talked about outdoor displays for, since 2006, right, Bob? Mm-hmm. Since 2006, and keeps getting pushed down the road. And according to our citizen survey that we took, there's a number of questions that would relate to this as far as appearance is concerned, and the clutter, and various what some people would consider eyesores. And this, in my opinion, at this point, now they would be allowed to have storage, that is, like stack them up like they're wrapped in plastic, however they do. But they would be, because there's no rule against it at the moment, they would be able to display hot tubs and pools on any part of their property, obviously, that doesn't take up parking, so they could have it out there in front of the place. And that's kind of going the opposite direction of where we're looking to go. If you see what I'm talking about, we're trying to figure out how to limit the clutter and try to keep especially that corridor right there, 158 and NC 12, to try to improve the appearance of those. And part of that is somehow going to involve outdoor display. And if we, by allowing that at this point, actually when it's being discussed later, if it's approved, by adding that, I think we would be going the direction opposite of what the vision that we have. That's all I have.
Any thoughts on, is that really where it would fall? Because obviously it specifies no outdoor storage.
Right.
But currently we don't have a way to delineate what's storage versus what's display. So that does leave vulnerability. Okay. So at some point we'll need to...
Has there been a specific request?
Well, no, this is a staff-generated request. We were looking at that issue of a business, and we were saying, well, it used to be allowed, and then now, is it still allowed? And the attorney and the staff had a discussion, and we felt like it probably still should be allowed under the current ordinance, but to clarify it further, it makes it a lot easier to put it in there. If you're going to have it, go ahead and list it. And if you would like to include outdoor display and storage in the language that goes to public hearing, that could be I check with the attorney and see if that's okay. You may want to do that and then see how it goes and add it or not.
But in doing that, then that limits everything in this district from doing any outdoor display.
No,
Would
it's tacked on specifically to this
Oh,
particular.
it can be, okay.
Yeah.
Would
It does-
it be a conditional
Okay.
use then, or no? Okay. It would just,
You just say no outdoor storage or display?
okay.
Okay, well, that makes, so it can be specifically linked to
Right.
that type of business.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then we should do it.
Yeah,
And I'm comfortable with that, then. I thought it would also cover all the other things listed.
No, ma'am.
Great, okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so is it the recommendation then of this board, whoever's going to make the motion as part of the motion, to add that language change to the scheduling of the public hearing? Did that make sense?
absolutely.
Okay. Brandy, you have a question?
Yes. Are we opening ourselves up for anything legally, Steve? No? Okay. Yes. I'm good.
Okay, so would someone like to make a motion?
Go for
Ready
it,
for that?
Mike. Go for it, Mike.
So in other words, what you're saying, to set the public hearing, when it comes back, is this language going to be changed? Is that what we're saying? We'd like it to be changed or have an option to have that in there?
We're gonna change it now.
Change it for the public hearing, Mike.
Is there a consensus to change that?
Yes.
Absolutely, yeah, for me.
Yes.
I think you could do
Add the words "or display" after storage.
both in the same motion, Steve?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, then I would make a motion to schedule a public hearing for January 14th, right?
No,
This one
December
we can do in
10th.
December. The other one we just
December,
never
I'm
have so much time.
For, is that
December 10th.
10th? Yes, okay. For a public hearing for December 10th at 7 PM. To discuss the proposed amendment, Chapter 153 zoning, Section 153.176N, commercial zone permitted uses, to add pool and hot tub sales to list of permitted retail businesses with the amendment for to have the code amended to add no outdoor storage or display. Is that all right?
Prohibit.
To prohibit, correct. Thank you.
Is there a second? Thank you for the motion.
I
Is there a
second that.
second? Okay. Any further discussion? Okay. All those in favor, please signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that's great. Great. Okay. Don't have any presentations this evening, so I'll move on to Commissioner's agenda. Mayor Pro Tem Hogan?
No, I don't have anything at the moment, thank you.
All right. Brandy?
I just want to, once again, say thank you to our police department for representing us at the dental clinic. They were above and beyond, and I mean, we had two officers in particular, well, not officers, Dana and Mark were there, and they were both on their days off in uniform representing the Department of Kill Double Heels, and it was just really nice to have them there, and it was a couple times they were really needed, so it was nice to have them again representing Kill Double Heels in full uniform and protecting us. So thanks.
Absolutely.
Okay. Mr. Woodard?
Yes, Mayor, if you will allow me a couple of minutes to thank everyone for their condolences and thoughts and prayers with the passing of my mother-in-law last Saturday. Needless to say, last week was, I had a very nice high, but the very next day I we had to deal with the passing of my mother-in-law, which was another low, so I had a lot of ups and downs and valleys last week. So thank you all for your thoughts and prayers. I really, really appreciate it, and Linda appreciates it. Little did I know back in the 50s when I was coming down here as a young man with my parents that I would certainly have an opportunity to do what I've been able to do in Kill Devil Hills, and that's move down here and live here permanently. Having coming down here in the 50s with my parents, and just been a wonderful opportunity to live here and make a living here, and almost 16 years of service to the town, having served on the street and special projects committees and served on the planning board, and now 11 years on this board. And so it's just had no idea that I would be able to do that as a kid coming down here, and it's been a privilege, and been past chairman of the Dare County Tourism Board and served on that board now. We have a meeting tomorrow, so I will tenure that resignation tomorrow. But I just wanted to thank everybody. My goal is to do my very best for the county as an elected official. I want to thank the citizens of Dare County for that opportunity, and I wish nothing but the best for this board. We had I've come to know the three of y'all. I've known at least Mike for a little bit longer time, but I have the utmost respect for all of y'all, and I know that y'all will do what's the best interest of this town moving forward. And I'm there on the county level to, my heart's right here in KDH, and whatever y'all need, I'll be more than glad to step up to the plate and do whatever I can to help this town, and for it to continue to be prosperous and successful. And I wish y'all nothing but the very best. With that said, I'd like to read my letter of resignation from the board. It's dated November the 14th to the Mayor, Board of Commissioners, and Town Manager. Dear Mayor, Board of Commissioners, Town Manager, please accept this as a formal notice of my resignation from the Kill Devil Hills Board of Commissioners position of Commissioner effective November 14, 2012. As I enter a new chapter in my life, I'm looking forward to my new position as Commissioner of Dare County. I leave the Kill Devil Hills Commissioner position with mixed emotions. I want to thank each of you, the Town Manager, and employees of Kill Devil Hills for your support during my time serving on the Board of Commissioners, which I have found enjoyable and fulfilling. Please note if there's anything I can do to help the town of Kill Devil Hills in my new position as Dare County Commissioner, I'm happy to assist in any way possible. My door will always be open to help. I leave knowing that each of you have the best interests of our citizens. I wish each of you continued success in your service to the town of Kill Devil Hills. Yours sincerely, Bob Woodard. So I will pass that on for the official record, Mayor. And thank you all for the opportunity to have served this length of time. I feel proud about my record from the standpoint that I think if you go back and ask Murray to do the check the records, I think I can count on one hand of the meetings I've missed planning special projects and commissioners, and I'm pretty proud of that record. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Bob.
Thank you, Mike.
Well, the first thing on my mayor's agenda was to congratulate you.
Yes, you did.
And certainly very confident that you will represent us well, not only our town, but certainly the larger constituency. I believe, Bob, under your seat
Oh, wow.
is a token that we have for you, but I'm not going to reach
Oh,
under
okay.
there. It's between your legs, so
Oh,
you
okay.
get that. But it's a small token of our appreciation. I mean, as you indicated, Bob has served close to 16 years in multiple factions representing our town, and no one could ever question your commitment to Kittleville Hills and the time you've spent investing in our town and doing what's right for our town. I certainly had a short tenure in working with you, but we have developed a very good working relationship, especially over the past 6 to 7 months, and I personally am grateful to have had that opportunity to work with you, and I look forward to working with you in your new capacity.
I do too. Thank you, Belle. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Before I have quite a few things that I want to cover before I jump right into that. But you guys don't want to steal the floor if you had anything. Okay, well, you guys will bear with me. I do have a handful of things I wanted to cover. First, if I can find it, put it away. This was late to add to our agenda, so it's not on our agenda, but there are two resolutions that I wanted to bring forth for consideration tonight. These were both recently adopted. I think you saw the email by the town of Nags Head. And the first one is a resolution of the board on US 158 Croatan Highway, and I'm not sure if we have those to put up, but basically it's the town of Nags Head adopted a resolution opposing the widening of 158 and specifically requesting DOT to look at what's the best use of trying to make 158, not the best use, what's the best way to make 158 corridor safer, and really looking into that. So this is a very similar resolution to what Nags Head did, but certainly focusing on our area of 158. Some of the other recommendations is that NCDOT consider eliminating the center turn lane in favor of a better access management plan that would improve safety and efficiency. The other is that NCDOT include improvements for bicycle and pedestrian safety, such as more visible crosswalks at signalized intersections, completion of the multi-use path and sidewalk connections, and dedicated and marked bike lanes in both directions. Ultimately, this resolution would be where our town requests consideration of an amended transportation improvement program that basically it's amending what they have recommended for that widening and looking at another plan, asking them to put another plan forward that would be safer, that would be better functioning, and have a more aesthetic impact on our town. So that's the first resolution that, if you all would be willing, I would like to ask that we adopt.
Need a motion for that?
Yes, we do.
I'd like to make a motion we adopt that resolution, please.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you. The second resolution is opposing what is put out there right now as a 30% insurance rate increase across 18 eastern North Carolina counties by the North Carolina Insurance Underwriters Association Beach Plan Coverage Area. And this resolution would basically put KDH going on record as opposing that 30% insurance rate increase. And asking them not to do that, basically. So.
Absolutely. I'll make the motion on that one.
I'll second that.
Okay.
Third.
Any further discussion on that? All those in favor, please signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Thank you. Next, I wanted to just quickly thank all of our town staff, from public service to public works to planning to administration, and finance has a hand in this. There's really not any town employee that doesn't, in times of hurricanes or natural disasters, roll up their sleeves and pitch in. Certainly, our Public Works Department was very busy, as in public safety, even prior to the storm, making preparations. And then everyone, all hands on deck afterwards, assessing damage and working with waiving permit fees and doing whatever we needed to get back on our feet as quickly as possible. So I just wanted to thank our staff for exceptional service. I also would like to thank and congratulate our police department for hosting another successful gang presentation last week, specifically recognizing Sergeant Henderson and Detective Johnson for the presentation. I came out to, even though I had been to the presentation before, and it was the same presentation again, it was nice to see. We had a full house of people here to listen to the presentation. And I commend their efforts in trying to get information out to the citizenry about the gang situation. It's not to scare anyone or to be alarmist, but the best way for us to be vigilant against gang activity is to be informed. There were some questions about why we wouldn't record it as we do our meetings and showcase it, but some of the content at that meeting is a bit sensitive, and you don't want to put it in the hands of the gang members that are already out in our community, especially as our police are indicating what intelligence they have or what they know. I believe it's something that we will continue to do, and I support the efforts of them doing that, and it's just great public service. And if you have not attended, the next time it comes up, please make a point to do so. It's really good information. So. I also I'm just full of thanks tonight, but Thanksgiving is next week. I do want to thank North Carolina Dominion Powers and North Carolina Dominion Power, and specifically Michael Thompson, who is our area representative with NC Dominion Power. And that's for what we recently experienced with the blackout. If you don't mind giving me a minute to read this, there still may be questions as to what happened and where we stand with things. I will say, when I still had the radio that I had borrowed from the fire department after Sandy, and I was at home, and when the lights went out, at first I didn't think much of it, but I was listening to the radio, and then when I heard that Nags Head was out, Frisco was out, Duck was out, Mans Harbor was out, Powell's Point, I got a little nervous. I first called my sister in Virginia to make sure she still had power and we weren't dealing with something, on a horrific level. But I called Michael Thompson, and his response was phenomenal. It enabled me to give some information to our police department to share with public safety and public services. And I appreciate that level of response and the relationship that we have with NC Dominion Power. But just in case you were curious about what happened, and this is from Michael Thompson in a later email, transmission service to the Outer Banks was disrupted at approximately 5:59 p.m. that evening. There was a defect in one of the transmission lines which knocked out power to nearly 40,000 customers. That includes all of our Outer Banks customers, which is 37,517. 2,270 customers in Elizabeth City area and the Mans Harbor delivery point in Currituck. The North Carolina Electric Membership Cooperation, NCEMC, was notified, and an estimated time of restoration of approximately 7:15 was given out. They successfully restored power to those 40,000 customers by 7:30 that evening, and I believe it was around 6:10 when I spoke to Michael Thompson, and he had given me that 7:15 time, and I believe my power came back on at 7:10. So they really were spot on in assessing what the problem was and responding. So just an update on that. I too had on my list to thank Assistant Chief Dana Harris and Captain Mark Evans for their assistance at the dental clinic. Brandy and I were there both days. We both serve on the committee that helps bring the clinic to Dare County each year. It was a very successful dental clinic again this year. We served 647 patients and delivered over $400,000 in dental services in those 2 days. So just amazing work, and it certainly takes a community effort. It's about 200 volunteers that it takes to put on that dental clinic. It was nice to see a lot of familiar faces from our town out there volunteering. So. I also want to highlight and thank Detective Sergeant John Towler for the cold case video on Denise Johnson. It's produced by Detective Sergeant Towler in collaboration with the Dare County Community Crime Line. If you have not had an opportunity to watch this, you can access it through YouTube, and I believe the link is on our website. When I went back today just to make sure I had the language correct, pretty impressive. It has already had over 3,000 views on that just since it was released a couple of weeks ago. But very well done information, and hopefully we can get some information from this for the family who still are wondering what happened to their loved one. So I do encourage you to take a minute to see that. Three more things. An update on the power poles from the public forum. For those of you who attended our public forum last month, there was a question posed by someone that attended the forum about not the big concrete poles, but the additional poles alongside the highway. And we did get a report. Michael Thompson spoke with Gene Whidbey of CenturyLink, and CenturyLink expects to have their conversion project completed by November 21st. Upon completion of that, CenturyLink will pull its poles and Dominion will pull the remaining poles. So that was really good news to hear, so I definitely wanted to share that. So hopefully with the new year, we will have fewer poles along the bypass. Yes. One thing I do need that's under my agenda to see if I can get board consensus, with Commissioner Woodard's resignation this evening, if there's consensus, I would like to add an agenda item to our December 10th meeting to discuss and possibly take action on filling the unexpired term of Commissioner Woodard. So if you guys are in agreement, if I could have a motion for that.
I'll make a motion that we add that agenda item.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? Okay. All those in favor, please signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And then the last thing, sorry I'm long-winded tonight, but the last thing I did want to revisit James Almany's comments earlier at the first public comment, and elaborate on Greg's comments regarding the sign or the banner that was put up at the spa place that you were talking about. And just, we had a very successful public forum a few weeks ago. And the purpose of those public forums are certainly to address issues that night, but also to make sure the public feels open to bring things to us. So it's a very casual meeting environment when we host these public forums. And we don't serve just the night of the meeting. We serve every day, all day. And I know I can speak for myself and certainly for my fellow commissioners. If anyone ever has a concern, they should bring it to us. And we will work with them the best that we can. And I know our staff will, as Greg was talking about. I mean, we're not unapproachable. And I do hope that through this negative experience, if my message tonight could be, let's find civil ways to work things out. And the best way is to have direct communication. I think with whatever is going on in that situation, it's either misinformation or drawing conclusions that may not be correct, that could easily be remedied by having clear communication one-on-one. So that's what I wanted to add to you bringing that up. And with all of that said, I will finish and move to the town manager's agenda.
Thank you, ma'am. The only thing I had this evening was to congratulate Commissioner Woodard and to thank him for his service to the town.
Thank you, Debbie.
Town manager's agenda. I'm sorry, town attorney's agenda.
She can go again.
We said it again, Debbie. I didn't. Sorry, town attorney.
I don't have anything for you except I think we we sent out an email, we completed the Bermuda Bay settlement. The town has been reimbursed for all their water and they're finished.
Thank you,
That's
Steve.
wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
See our
Hanging around
smiling
for a while.
finance director in the back, very happy about that as well. So, great. Okay, consent agenda.
Yes, ma'am, thank you. 3 items on the consent agenda this evening. The first is the minutes from the October 8th and the 24th meeting. The second is recordation of the Board of Commissioners' consensus approval to waive building permit fee, construction, and repairs necessary for Hurricane Sandy through June 30th, 2013, and to conclude the waiving of the building permit fees for Hurricane Irene effective December 13th, 2012. I'm sorry, that should be December 31st. That's, the number's transposed. December 31st, 2012. The third budget amendment is the budget amendments. The first one, number 5, to record tower rental income. The second one is to appropriate the sale of the additional 480 gallons per day of wastewater capacity. And the last one, number 7, to record organized crime drug enforcement task force overtime grant to the police department. And would ask the board for approval of the consent agenda as presented.
Thank you.
I'll make a motion that we approve the consent agenda.
I'll second it.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor, please signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Now is the time set aside for, I guess it's the second time for our public comment. Is there anyone? Yes, Mike, welcome.
Mike Lowak, 106 Port Hole Court. Only have 2 things. First of all, I personally would like to express my gratitude to Commissioner Woodard for his service. I had no idea it was 16 years. I have learned a lot from him just through his examples, and I, for one, will be sad to see him go.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate that very much.
You're very welcome. And second is just a passing comment on one of the things that was discussed earlier about how Nags Head taxes for the beach nourishment. I do happen to know a little bit about that. It is a special assessment tax that they are staggering from the beachfront properties to the one-offs, two-offs, all the way to the west side. It's over 5 years, but they don't have a plan to charge the same exact amount for each year based on the payoff schedule, what interest rates do, whatnot. But I do have all of those numbers in my office, but I don't have them committed to memory because it is fluid. That they won't be the same from one year to the next. But if anybody would like that or like my input on how they're doing it, I'd be happy to furnish what I use on a daily basis. So thank you all for your time tonight.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Is there anyone else that would like to speak this evening? Public comment? No one else? Okay. Well, response to public comment. Thank you for sharing that information. We'll probably take you up on getting that. So.
I do have one thing regarding the incident we were talking about with the banner. There's a quote by Brad Thor. He's a fiction writer, very popular, best-selling author. And I'm going to paraphrase because I didn't bring it with me, but he says that, and a lot of others have said this too, that granting the citizenry the freedom of speech also grants them the ability to offend you. So I defend their freedom and I'm offended. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else before we adjourn? If not, we just need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in, or any further discussion? All those in favor, please signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Good night. Thank you all for
Thank
being
you all
here.
for coming.